The night was darker than usual. Clouds swallowed the moon, and the air was heavy with silence. Inside a small wooden house at the edge of the forest, a man sat alone, finishing his tea. He was used to quiet nights, but something about this one felt strange. The wind didn't move the trees. The crickets didn't sing. It was as if the world was waiting for something. Then it came. A knock, soft at first, almost too faint to notice. The man frowned and tilted his head. No one ever came this late. He waited, listening. Silence. He shook his head, telling himself it must be the wind. But before his thoughts could settle, the knock came again. Louder this time. Firm. Urgent. A chill ran down his back. Midnight visitors never brought good news. He stood slowly, every step toward the door heavy with unease. His hand hovered above the handle, but he didn't open it right away. He pressed his ear close, straining to hear. At first there was nothing. Then, a sound that made his chest tighten. A cry. Not of an adult. Not of an animal. But the helpless cry of a baby. His breath caught. What kind of cruel person would leave a child out in the freezing night? He yanked the door open, half expecting to see a neighbor, half expecting a trick. What he saw instead made his heart stop. There, standing in the pale light of his porch, was a figure unlike any he had ever seen. A woman, or something like one, trembled on shaky legs. Her skin shimmered faintly under the night, almost glowing. Her eyes, large and strange, spoke of pain and exhaustion. In her arms she carried a baby wrapped in torn cloth, its tiny glowing eyes staring straight at him. The man froze. His first instinct was fear. This was not human. Neither the mother nor the child belonged to this world. His mind screamed at him to shut the door, to run, to pretend this never happened. But before he could move, the woman stumbled forward. She looked at him with eyes filled with desperation. Her lips moved, but the words were broken, foreign, a language he could not understand. With the last of her strength, she extended her arms and placed the baby into his chest. The man's body stiffened, but his hands closed around the child before he could think. The baby whimpered softly, curling its tiny fingers into his shirt. And then, as if her body had finally given up, the mother collapsed onto the wooden floor. She didn't move. The man's heart raced. He looked down at the baby in his arms, then at the lifeless body on his porch. What am I supposed to do?" he whispered. His voice shook, fear wrapping tightly around him. He had never held a child before, certainly not one with glowing eyes and skin unlike his own. The baby began to cry again, its small voice echoing through the night. Something inside him shifted. Fear was still there, but it was drowned by something stronger. Compassion. This was no monster. This was a child, helpless and innocent. He crouched down, touching the mother's neck lightly. She was alive, though barely. Her breaths were shallow, weak. He couldn't just leave her there to die, but bringing her inside felt dangerous. Every instinct told him this was trouble, that keeping them close would change his life forever. He stood at the doorway, torn between choices. His eyes moved from the unconscious mother to the fragile infant in his arms. The fire inside his house glowed warmly behind him, while outside the forest loomed, cold and merciless. Finally, he made his decision. He bent down, sliding one arm under the woman's frail body. She was light, too light, as if her strength had long since been drained. With effort, he carried her inside, placing her on the couch near the fire. The baby's cries softened as the warmth of the house wrapped around them. The man rocked the child gently, unsure if it would even understand the comfort he tried to give. Slowly, the tiny being calmed, staring at him with those strange glowing eyes. For a moment, the fear inside him faded. He sat back, his mind full of questions he could not answer. Who was she? Why had she come to his door? And what danger might follow her? He rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Outside, the forest seemed alive with whispers. In the distance, faint lights flickered between the trees, moving slowly, deliberately. The man did not notice them yet, but deep inside, he felt a sense of unease, as if unseen eyes were already watching. He glanced at the baby again, cradled against his chest. "Why me?" he murmured softly. The child blinked up at him, innocent, unknowing. He did not realize it yet, but with that knock, his quiet life had ended. What had begun as a strange midnight visit was now the first step into a story that would change everything. The small house was filled with silence, broken only by the soft crackle of firewood and the faint cries of the alien child. The man paced back and forth, his mind in chaos. In one arm he carried the baby, whose glowing eyes blinked up at him with helpless innocence. On the couch, the alien mother lay unconscious, her breathing shallow and unsteady. He stared at her, unsure of what to do. She wasn't human, anyone could see that. Her skin had a faint glow, her features sharper than his own kind. Her body so frail it looked as though she hadn't eaten in weeks. She looked more like a shadow of life than a living being. And yet, she had trusted him with her child. Why leave her baby with a stranger? The man felt torn apart. Part of him wanted to run outside, to shout for help, to let someone else deal with this. If the authorities discovered them, maybe they would take the aliens away, maybe give them food or medicine. But another voice inside him whispered something darker. What if the authorities weren't safe? What if taking them out into the open meant their deaths? He glanced at the child again. It whimpered softly, clutching his shirt with tiny fingers that burned warm against his skin. His heart twisted. The baby didn't understand fear. It only understood hunger, warmth, and the need to be held. The man sat down at his old wooden table, the child still in his arms. His head dropped into his free hand. His life had always been quiet, simple, predictable. Work during the day, food in the evening, rest at night. But this was something else entirely. With one knock, his life had become tangled with beings from another world. He thought about ignoring it all. He could leave the baby on the doorstep, close the door, and pretend nothing had happened. He could push the mother outside too and let the night take care of what he could not. His heart hardened for a moment as he tried to imagine it. But the baby whimpered again, and the thought shattered instantly. He couldn't do it. He wasn't that kind of man. The fire flickered, casting shadows across the mother's face. She stirred weakly, her lips parting as though trying to speak. The man leaned closer, straining to hear. Only broken words escaped her mouth, foreign and soft, but the tone was clear. Fear, desperation, pleading. She was begging him, even in her weakened state, not to let them die. He swallowed hard, torn deeper than ever. Helping her meant risk. Keeping them here meant danger. If anyone discovered them, he would be seen as a traitor, someone who sheltered outsiders. He could lose his home. He could lose his life. But could he really abandon them? Could he live with himself afterward? He looked down at the child again, rocking it gently. Its glowing eyes reflected the firelight, innocent yet full of a strange power. In that moment, he realized the truth. This was not just a child of another world. It was still a child, no different in its need for care than any human baby. The man stood slowly and walked toward a small cabinet in the corner. He pulled out a blanket, soft though worn with age, and wrapped it carefully around the baby. The infant's cries softened, its small body curling into warmth and comfort. He then returned to the couch, kneeling beside the alien mother. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, each breath shallow. He whispered, though she could not hear, "I don't know why you came to me. I don't know what danger follows you. But if you trusted me enough to leave your child in my arms, then I'll protect you both." The words felt heavy, almost like a vow. But even as he spoke them, a sound outside caught his ear. His head snapped toward the window. The forest beyond was dark, but for the first time he noticed faint lights moving between the trees. Slow, careful, searching. His stomach clenched. He wasn't imagining it. Someone or something was already looking for them. Fear struck him again, harder than before. His choice was no longer between comfort and danger. It was now survival. He had to decide quickly. Stay hidden and hope the searchers passed by, or try to move the mother and child to somewhere safer. But where could he take them? The baby let out another soft cry, and he pressed it closer to his chest to quiet it. His hands shook. If the lights outside heard, if the hunters came closer, it would all be over. The man felt the walls closing in. His mind screamed with questions. Why me? Why here? Why now? But there were no answers. Only the weight of his decision. To hide, to protect, to risk everything. He stood tall, the baby against his chest, and looked once more at the unconscious mother. The firelight danced across her strange, fragile face. She had come to his door for a reason. Maybe fate had chosen him, or maybe it was only chance. But it didn't matter anymore. He had already made his choice. The house was still, but the man's heart was not. He barely slept that night, his ears tuned to every sound from outside. The faint lights he had seen in the forest haunted him. Whoever they were, they hadn't knocked on his door. Yet. He prayed they had moved on, though his gut told him otherwise. By morning, the alien mother stirred. A low groan escaped her lips, her chest rising unevenly. The man rushed to her side. Her eyes flickered open, strange and luminous, full of both pain and fear. For a long moment, she looked around in confusion, her gaze landing on the baby wrapped tightly in the man's arms. Relief softened her face. The man spoke carefully, unsure if she could understand. You're safe here. For now. She blinked, struggling to sit up. Her hands trembled as she reached for the child. He hesitated but gently placed the baby back into her arms. She hugged it close, rocking softly, whispering in a language he didn't know. The baby cooed in response, as though recognizing her voice. The man sat down opposite her, his eyes fixed. He had so many questions burning inside. Who was she? Why had she come here? Who were the lights in the forest? And why did she trust him, a stranger? As if sensing his questions, she tried to speak. Her words came broken, her voice weak. First he shook his head, not understanding. But then she began to gesture, pointing to the child, then to herself, then upward, as if toward the stars. The man leaned in, carefully watching. Piece by piece, he began to see her story. She came from far beyond, not from this world. Her people had once lived in safety, hidden among the stars. But then hunters came. Not men, not exactly, but something more ruthless. They wanted power, resources, control. To them, her kind were nothing but prey. The mother's voice cracked as she spoke in fragments, but her eyes told the story her words could not. She mimed flames with her fingers, destruction raining down, the screams of her people scattered in the night. She gestured to her thin frame, showing hunger and flight. She had run, carrying her child, hiding in shadows, chased across lands she did not know. Finally, her trembling hand pointed toward the baby. Her lips moved softly, almost like a prayer. The child was the reason she had not given up. Whatever hope remained in her heart lived in those small glowing eyes. The man listened in silence, his chest tight. He could not understand every detail, but he felt the weight of her truth. She was not just a stranger at his door. She was a refugee, a mother fighting to protect the only thing left of her world. He glanced at the child, now quiet against her chest. For a moment, the glowing eyes met his, innocent but heavy with unspoken meaning. He felt something stir inside him, a strange mix of fear, pity, and respect. The mother's body shook suddenly, her strength failing again. She coughed, clutching her chest. The man panicked, rushing to the small shelf where he kept water. He brought the cup to her lips, helping her drink. She swallowed slowly, then whispered a word, one word, clear enough for him to understand. Hide! His body stiffened. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were urgent. She gestured again, this time toward the window, toward the forest beyond. She knew. She knew they were being hunted, and that danger was not far away. The man swallowed hard. His mind raced back to the flickering lights he had seen. They weren't just wanderers in the woods. They were searching for her, searching for the child. And if they found them here, he would not be spared either. He looked at her, fragile and broken, clutching her baby with the last of her strength. "Why me?" he asked softly. "Why did you come to my door?" Her eyes met his, filled with something deeper than words. In that silence, he understood. She had not chosen him for who he was. She had chosen him because she had no one else. And sometimes fate didn't choose heroes. It chose the ones who happened to be there. The man felt the weight of her secret press against him like a stone. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't wanted this. But now he was part of it. Their survival was tied to him. He rubbed his forehead, pacing across the room again. Outside, morning light crept through the curtains, but instead of comfort, it brought dread. Daylight meant the hunters could search more easily. Daylight meant less time to prepare. He turned back to her. She was already drifting again, her body too weak to stay awake. But the baby stirred in her arms, letting out a small cry. The sound pierced the silence. The man quickly hushed it, fear gnawing at him. Every instinct screamed at him to hand them over, to free himself of this burden. But when he looked again at the mother, exhausted yet still clinging to her child, his resolve hardened. He couldn't betray them. Not now. Not after what he had learned. He looked out the window once more. The forest seemed calm, but he knew better. Somewhere out there, the hunters were still moving, still waiting. And he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The secret he now carried was dangerous enough to destroy not just them, but him as well. The sun had barely risen when the man's unease deepened. The house was quiet, but the silence outside was heavier than before. No birds sang, no animals stirred in the forest. It was as if even nature knew something dangerous was near. He stood by the window, the old wooden frame creaking as he leaned forward. Between the trees, shadows shifted. At first, he thought it was his imagination. But then he saw it clearly. Dark figures moving carefully, almost blending with the forest. They weren't travelers. They were searching. His breath quickened. The alien mother's warning echoed in his mind. Hide. He turned toward the couch, where she lay weak, her child cradled close to her chest. Her eyes were half open, glowing faintly with exhaustion. She looked at him, and without words, he knew she sensed it too. The danger was near. The man's heart pounded. He had never been a fighter. He was no soldier, no hero. But now, standing in his small home with two fragile lives depending on him, he felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. A sudden crack outside snapped his thoughts. A branch breaking. He flinched, gripping the edge of the window. The figures were closer now, their movements slow but purposeful. He saw faint glimmers of strange devices in their hands, glowing softly like fireflies. They weren't just searching with eyes, they had tools, scanners, things not of this world. He pulled the curtain shut quickly, his palms sweaty. His mind raced. What should he do? Stay silent and hope they passed? Try to run? But the mother was too weak, the baby too fragile. Running meant they wouldn't last an hour. He turned to her. She whispered something, her voice barely audible. He didn't understand the words, but her eyes begged him to keep still, to trust silence. The baby let out a soft cry. His chest clenched with fear. He rushed over, gently rocking the child, praying the sound hadn't carried outside. The infant whimpered but quieted after a moment, pressing its glowing eyes against his shirt. The man's heart beat so loudly he thought the strangers outside might hear it too. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then came the sound that made his blood run cold. A knock. Not on the door this time, but on the wall outside, deliberate and slow. Tap, tap, tap. The kind of knock that wasn't asking permission but announcing presence. He froze, his breath caught in his throat. The mother's eyes widened. She clutched the baby tighter, whispering something quick and urgent. Her voice trembled with fear. The man motioned for her to stay quiet. He crept toward the door, pressing his ear against it. On the other side, faint voices murmured. The language was strange, sharp, and cold. He couldn't understand, but the tone was clear. They were hunting. They were certain something or someone was here. Another knock. Louder. His legs shook. He stepped back, unsure what to do. Should he answer? Should he stay silent? If he answered, they would see her. If he stayed silent, they might break in. He looked around the small room, desperate for options. His eyes landed on the old cellar door beneath the rug. It had been unused for years, but it still led to a small underground space where food had once been stored. It wasn't much, but it was something. Quickly, he moved the rug aside, lifting the wooden hatch with trembling hands. The hinges groaned softly, and he winced at the noise. He turned to the alien mother, motioning urgently. She understood, though her body moved slowly with exhaustion. He helped her to her feet, supporting her frail frame as she clutched her baby close. Step by step, he guided her to the cellar. She descended shakily, the man holding her arm until she was safely below. The baby stirred, but she hushed it gently, her glowing eyes pleading with him to follow quickly. Before he could climb down, the knock at the door turned into a violent bang. The wood rattled under the force. He shut the cellar hatch quickly, covering it again with the rug. His chest heaved as he stood, alone now in the room, facing the door that threatened to break open. The banging grew louder. Voices outside barked orders, sharp and commanding. He knew they wouldn't wait much longer. His hands shook as he grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace, gripping it tightly though he had never used it as a weapon. The door creaked, the hinges straining as the banging continued. Dust fell from the ceiling. He stepped back, raising the poker with trembling arms. His mind screamed that he was a fool, that he stood no chance against whatever was out there. But another voice whispered inside him, "If you don't stand, they will find her. They will take the child. And all of this will end." The banging stopped. Silence. The man's breath was shallow, his knuckles white around the poker. He waited. Seconds dragged into eternity. Then, through the window, a shadow passed, tall, thin, with movements too smooth to be human. Another followed. Then another. They circled the house like wolves, silent, waiting for weakness. The man stayed frozen, every muscle screaming with fear. The silence was worse than the knocking. They were still there, watching, waiting. Down below, the alien mother held her child close in the dark, praying the shadows above would leave. And the man, standing alone in his living room, realized the truth. This was only the beginning. The hunters knew. They would not stop until they found what they were looking for. And sooner or later, his small home would not be enough to keep them out. The long night had passed, but the man still felt the weight of fear pressing on his chest. The hunters hadn't broken in, yet their presence lingered in his mind like a shadow that refused to leave. He sat by the window until the first light of dawn touched the trees, his body tense, the poker from the fire still in his hand. When he was sure the forest was quiet, he went to the cellar and lifted the hatch. Two glowing eyes looked up at him, tired but calm. The alien mother held her child close, her body curled protectively around it. She had not slept, her face showed it. Yet when she saw the man's face, some of her fear softened. He reached out a hand to help her climb, and for the first time she took it without hesitation. Her skin was cool, fragile, but her grip was strong when it came to her child. She rose slowly, her legs weak, clutching the baby as though the world might tear it away at any moment. He led her to the couch again and placed a blanket over her shoulders. She looked around the small home with weary eyes, and then down at her child. The baby stirred, whimpering softly, its glowing eyes flickering in the firelight. The man felt something shift inside him as he watched them. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something deeper, heavier. A responsibility he hadn't asked for but couldn't push away. The baby cried louder, a sharp sound in the quiet room. The mother tried to calm it, rocking gently, whispering words in her strange language. But the child's hunger was clear, its tiny body restless. The man frowned, realizing he had nothing for a baby. No milk, no proper food. Still, he tried. He brought water, dipping a cloth and letting the mother squeeze drops into the child's mouth. Slowly, the cries softened. The mother looked up at him with eyes full of gratitude. She spoke a word he didn't know, but her tone said enough. She was thanking him, He nodded awkwardly, unsure what to do with such trust. He had lived alone for years, never needing anyone, never being needed. But now, in this quiet room, 2 lives depended on him completely. It unsettled him, yet it warmed something inside his heart he didn't know was still alive. Hours passed. The mother drifted into shallow sleep, the baby curled against her chest. The man sat near the fire, watching them. He told himself he was only keeping guard, but his gaze kept drifting back to the child. Its small fingers twitched, reaching even in sleep. Its glowing eyes opened briefly, meeting his. For a moment, he forgot it wasn't human. All he saw was innocence. Later, when the baby woke and fussed again, the mother was too weak to rise. She looked at him, silently asking for help. Awkward and unsure, he took the child into his arms. At first, the baby squirmed, tiny cries echoing through the room. But then, as he rocked it gently, something surprising happened. The baby settled. Its cries faded into soft breaths, and soon its glowing eyes blinked up at him peacefully. The man stared down, a strange warmth spreading through his chest. He had expected fear, rejection, maybe even disgust. But holding the child felt, right, natural, as though his arms had always been meant to protect it. The mother opened her eyes and watched him. A faint smile touched her lips, small, tired, but real. She whispered a word again, softly. He didn't know it, but he felt its meaning. Trust. The fire crackled as evening returned. For the first time since they had come into his life, the house felt less like a place of fear and more like a shelter. The man sat with the baby in his arms, the mother resting nearby. They did not speak the same language, yet in silence they understood each other. But peace came with its own danger. As the baby reached for his finger, curling its tiny hand around it, the man thought of the hunters. They would come back. They had not given up. And when they did, they would not care about innocence or kindness. They would tear this fragile bond apart without hesitation. The thought made his chest tighten. He had never fought for anything before, never risked himself for another. But now, looking at the child and its weary mother, he knew he couldn't step aside. Something had changed inside him. When the baby laughed, a soft, unexpected sound, he even smiled. It was small and brief, but it was real. The mother saw and closed her eyes, resting for the first time without fear. The man looked into the fire, gripping the poker at his side. He whispered under his breath, not sure if he was making a promise or admitting the truth. They're mine to protect now. And in that dim little house, for the first time in his lonely life, he felt he was no longer alone. They weren't just strangers. They weren't just burdens. They were his family now. The days that followed were uneasy. The man tried to create some rhythm of survival inside his small house, but every sound outside reminded him of the danger that still circled in the forest. The alien mother grew a little stronger each day, though her body was still frail. The baby laughed more often, its glowing eyes bright with life. For brief moments, the house even felt alive again. But peace was a thin blanket over a storm. On the 4th night, the storm finally broke. The man woke to a sound that twisted his stomach. A sharp hum, unlike anything natural, filled the air. He rushed to the window and froze. Strange lights floated between the trees, cold, mechanical, scanning the ground. Shadows moved with purpose. They weren't searching randomly this time. They were closing in. The alien mother was already awake, clutching her baby tightly. Her glowing eyes shone with terror as she whispered a single word he understood too well. Run. The man shook his head. Running through the forest with a weak mother and a fragile child was suicide. They would be caught in minutes. His house wasn't much, but it was all they had. His jaw tightened. We stay. We fight. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Her eyes widened in shock, then softened with something else. Trust. He grabbed the iron poker from beside the fire and looked around the room. His heart pounded as he realized how little he had. A few tools, an old hunting knife, the cellar hatch. No walls of stone, no weapons of war. Just a man and his will to protect. The humming grew louder. The ground outside trembled with heavy steps. Then came the first knock at the door, louder than before, like thunder shaking the wood. The baby whimpered, its glowing eyes wide with fear. The man rushed to the cellar hatch, lifting it open. "Go," he urged, motioning for the mother to climb down. She clutched her baby and obeyed, her movements hurried, desperate. He lowered the hatch just as the second bang hit the door. The wood cracked, splinters flying. He stood alone now, gripping the poker with white knuckles. His breath came in sharp gasps, fear clawing at him. But beneath the fear was something stronger. He thought of the child's tiny hand curling around his finger, of the mother's tired smile when she whispered safe. They had chosen him, and he would not fail them. The door shattered. Figures burst inside, tall, thin, cloaked in shadows. Their movements were smooth, inhuman. Their eyes glowed faintly, scanning the room. One raised a strange device that hummed with deadly energy. The man roared, charging forward with the poker. It was a fool's weapon against their machines, but in that moment he didn't care. He swung with all his strength, striking the first figure across its arm. The creature staggered back with a hiss, sparks flying from the device it carried. The others moved in. The man swung again, his body fueled by desperation. He dodged, stumbled, struck wildly. Pain seared his side as one of their weapons grazed him, but he didn't stop. Every strike was for the baby hidden below, every roar for the mother who had trusted him. The fight was chaos. Metal against flesh, light against shadow. He was outnumbered, outmatched, but he refused to fall. He grabbed a lantern from the shelf and hurled it against the wall. Flames leapt across the wood, smoke filling the air. The creatures hissed, retreating slightly from the fire. The man used the moment to push forward, driving them back step by step. His arms ached, his body burned, but his will only hardened. "You won't take them," he shouted, his voice shaking the house more than the hunter's weapons. One of the creatures lunged, striking him hard across the chest. He fell to the floor, breath knocked from his lungs. The poker clattered away. The hunter raised its weapon, energy crackling at the tip. But before the strike landed, a sound pierced the chaos, a baby's cry, faint but clear, rising from below the floor. The hunters froze, their heads snapping toward the sound. Their glowing eyes flared with hunger. They had found what they were searching for. The man's vision blurred from pain, but he forced his body to move. Crawling, gasping, he grabbed the fallen knife from the table. With the last of his strength, he lunged upward, plunging it into the nearest hunter's chest. Sparks exploded as the creature screeched, collapsing to the ground. The others turned back to him, furious. He knew he couldn't win. His body was failing, his strength fading. But he would not let them reach the cellar. He staggered to his feet, spreading his arms wide between the hunters and the hatch. His chest rose and fell raggedly, his face twisted with pain but his eyes blazing with defiance. "You'll go through me first." The fire roared higher, smoke filling the room. The hunters advanced, their shadows stretching long and sharp. And in that moment the man felt no fear, only purpose. The house burned. Flames licked the wooden walls, smoke curling toward the night sky. The man stood in the middle of the room, his body weak, his chest heavy with pain. The hunters surrounded him, shadows moving closer through the firelight. He knew he had no strength left to fight again, yet his feet did not move. He stood between them and the cellar, a shield made of nothing but will. Then it happened. The baby's cry rose once more, but this time it wasn't soft. It echoed through the house, high and piercing, carrying a strange power. The hunters froze. Their glowing eyes flickered. The cry grew louder, and the air itself seemed to tremble. The baby's glow seeped through the cracks of the cellar hatch, lighting the smoke-filled room in silver blue. The hunters hissed, their smooth movements faltering. One by one, they stepped back, covering their eyes as the glow brightened. The man watched in awe as the creatures that had seemed unstoppable now retreated like beasts before fire. The baby's power was more than sound. It was something deeper, something they feared. The alien mother's voice rose from below, chanting soft words in her strange tongue. She was calling to her child, guiding its power. The glow pulsed brighter, filling the house until the hunters stumbled, hissing, retreating into the night. Their shapes melted back into the forest, leaving behind the crackle of fire and the man's ragged breathing. Silence fell. The hunters were gone. The man dropped to his knees, exhaustion flooding him. His vision blurred, but he forced himself to crawl toward the cellar hatch. With trembling hands, he lifted it open. The mother stared up at him, her face damp with sweat, her eyes glowing faintly. The baby lay in her arms, calm again, its glow fading to a gentle shimmer. She whispered something, her voice weak but steady. Though he didn't know the words, he understood the meaning. They were safe. The man reached down, helping her climb out. Together, they stumbled out of the burning house. The night air was sharp with smoke, but the stars shone above them, clear and endless. The fire roared behind, consuming the only home he had ever known. He should have felt grief, but instead, all he felt was relief. The house was gone, yes, but the mother and child were alive. They walked to the edge of the forest, the flames painting the trees gold. The man's body shook with pain, but he carried part of the weight, steadying the mother when her legs faltered. The baby looked up at him from her arms, and for a moment, he almost smiled despite the ash on his face. At the riverbank, they stopped. The water shimmered under the starlight, calm despite the chaos they had left behind. The mother turned to him, her eyes filled with something he had not seen before, hope. She placed a trembling hand on his chest, just above his heart. Then she pointed upward, toward the endless sky. Her voice whispered one clear word in his tongue, broken but strong enough to understand. Future. The man swallowed hard. He understood. The baby was more than just a child. It was a future her people still had, a future the hunters feared. And somehow that future now included him. He looked down at the child, then back at her. "I'll help you," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "As long as I can, I'll help." The mother's eyes softened, and for the first time since she had come to his door, she smiled fully. It was weak, but it carried light. They stayed by the river until dawn. The forest was still, the fire behind them reduced to embers. When the first rays of morning touched the sky, the man felt something he hadn't felt in years, something stronger than fear. Purpose. He wasn't just a lonely man anymore. He wasn't just someone who happened to open the door that night. He was their protector, their guardian, their family. The journey ahead would not be easy. The hunters would return. The world would not welcome them. But as the baby laughed softly in its mother's arms, reaching a tiny hand toward him, the man knew he would not turn away. This was no longer just their fight. It was his too. He looked at the rising sun, golden light spilling over the forest, and whispered to himself, "A new beginning." And with that, they walked forward together. The human, the alien mother, and the child who carried both hope and danger in its glowing eyes, toward a future none of them could yet see, but all of them were ready to face.